I'm Big Don Luca, smoke you like my hookah. Pump fake right, then I step back in illusion. That's a boss move maneuver, billionaire entrepreneur. Mark Cuban on the viewer, put you rookies on a skewer. I stay shitting on you boys like I came up from the sewer. Used to have a lot of dollars, now I got a lot fewer. What you saying to me? I hope you save it for me. I'm about to kill the game, and I put it in my testimony.
Hi, welcome to the Mainstream Mavs podcast. This is your host, Will. I'm joined here by my co-host, Jaren.
What is up, guys?
Today, we are going to be getting into how the Mavericks have started off Summer League here with a 1-1 start. Jaden Hardy leading the Mavericks in both games with 24 points respectively in each game. They started off their Summer League by losing 91-80 to the Oklahoma City Thunder on July 8th, so on Saturday. And then yesterday, they won to the Philadelphia 76ers Summer League team, 111-103 after they were down by 15 points in the fourth quarter. Things were looking very grim for the Mavericks, but they were able to pull a pretty team-spirited comeback and pull away with a pretty decisive victory. There's a lot of sort of conflicting things that you get out of Summer League, especially you may see a player lock down an opponent and play some of the best defenses of his life, like one possession, then the next possession completely concede a clear way to the rim for said player and not even try on defense. So there's a lot to take in, but we also do have to remember that these guys are learning all these new schemes, trying to keep pace at the NBA level, even for the guys that have been in the NBA and are trying to make a return to the NBA or have been in the G League. It is another sort of field of competition, with a lot more NBA talent than they're used to. So there's a lot of variables at play. So you never want to get too overreactive to anything that happens in Summer League, Jaren. But based on the Mavericks' first two games, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good. Omax, Dereck Lively, AJ Lawson, all these guys that we expected to get big minutes outside of the first game for the Rooks. We have seen big minutes, and not just big minutes, but we've seen good play. And we've seen the holes, I guess, that they need to work on. I think that's probably most important. Is we've seen what this team, or not what this team, but what these guys need to develop. And ensure what the next steps are at the next level. So I think it's been very exciting to see them play, whether it's Jaden Hardy sort of balling out on inefficient numbers as per usual in Summer League, that is. But I've been having a fun time with it. I think the fans have been having a fun time with it. Omax is everything that we've expected on the defensive end. Dereck Lively, he's been a little shaky, but his shot contesting has been pretty solid. But he's been fun to watch. And Jaden Hardy's been, of course, fun to watch. He's always a guy that's going to be a sort of looker whenever he's getting to the hoop, and that's one thing that we've noticed throughout his career so far. So everything that we've, I guess, wanted to see, we have seen. There is some more that we would like to see out of these young rookies. But look, it's only Summer League. We're only going to get a handful of games. We're going to have to wait till Summer League or till camp starts, and then preseason, of course, and then going on to the regular season to see some more minutes of what these guys could possibly do. But from now, it hasn't been too good of a sampling size, but it's been fun to watch. So I think that's probably, I'll leave it at that because, it has been very fun to watch, and especially that comeback. I will admit that was very fun. And Jaden Hardy honestly led the way with 24 points. So that was fun.
Now, Jaden Hardy has definitely been trying to expand as a playmaker, as well as, a scorer, just in his ability to get to the rim and things of that nature. And Jared Dudley, Mavs Summer League coach, who's been doing a pretty, tremendous job. If you've watched some of the clips in terms of how he's talking about the schematics, a lot of those have been posted up on Twitter by Grant Afseth and some other guys. Jared Dudley has really been spearheading this roster for the Mavericks, and for a guy that was just not in the league really all too, long ago. I think he's doing an excellent job as a coach. And, he's talked a little bit about Hardy's struggles and, what they've been conducive to, and, just being able to perfect the pacing, not rushing things, trying to hit the guy in the weak side corner when the low man flashes down low, like things of that nature. There's really just a lot of good digs, that he's talked about. But with Jaden Hardy, he's had a rougher sort of two games. That first game was definitely a lot more efficient in terms of his shot making. But, he kind of waned in terms of his productivity as the game went on. And then we saw the opposite in the second game where he kind of got hot towards the end. But, throughout that first half, I mean, he looked just really dead, was not able to get by anybody, didn't have good legs on his jump shot, was making a lot of sort of lackadaisical turnovers. And apparently Sham God had a halftime speech that really invigorated some fire into him. And luckily, the Mavericks were able to come back and win. So I think given the competitor that Jaden is and how advanced he is, still playing in Summer League, I think he's going to go off on really efficient shooting at least one of these games, get a 30-plus bomb for sure, given that, he already had one last year with his first game against the Bulls in last year's Summer League. But seeing how these next, at least guaranteed 3 games are going to pan out is going to be really intriguing, really exciting. And I think that we'll, learn a lot more about some of the prospects on the Mavericks, especially as, Dereck Lively and, Omax play a little bit more minutes, as Jared Dudley hinted at on Twitter, because they obviously had to sit out the first, sort of part of the Summer League training camp due to some trades not being made official yet. And it kind of hindered how much they were able to play so far. So that's going to be, fun to watch as we continue to get even more and more of Dallas's new featured rookies, up front. And also, I mean, just, seeing some of these developmental guys like Jordan Walker, Mike Miles, some of the guys that, are in training camp invites or potential 2-way deals, seeing how they pan out is going to be very intriguing as well. But what I do really like what the Mavericks have done this Summer League more so than anything is, not limiting Jaden Hardy in terms of his minutes or, even making him sit out of Summer League outright, kind of like what they did with Josh Green a couple years ago, even though that was kind of at the crossing of regimes with COVID and everything, and Summer League was all screwed up. I really like them, kind of doing what Houston's doing with some of their second-year guys who are really good, still playing them heavy minutes. I don't think the Mavericks are, going to do anything like the Spurs did with, Wembanyama, or what the Thunder did with Jalen Williams from Santa Clara, where they're going to sit these guys after, just one game or something like that. And specifically in Hardy's case, I like that they're at least getting him some good developmental run here because, he looked good last year, especially towards the tail end of the season. But I don't know if he's on par with some of those other guys that are just completely ready to, hit the ground running in terms of their development. And, obviously while they do have stuff to work on or maybe evolving a bit faster, I still think it's a good thing despite his, insane scoring ability to be able to, clean up a lot of the playmaking issues, a lot of the turnover issues in Summer League. So it's going to be fun going forward. But otherwise, in today's podcast, we'll spin the rumor mill a little bit, catch up on some free agent stuff. We're reserving, kind of another week or two, at least till Summer League's over, to, fully dissect all the moves Mavericks have made, but, and get into exact, the fit of everything with every single player, Grant Williams and all that stuff. But, we still will be talking about them ad nauseum on this podcast, referencing all the moves the Mavericks have made and what they could be doing. So of course, as, the offseason drags along, despite some trades maybe not coming into fruition as fast as we'd like it to, we're still going to be talking about whatever sort of rumors are, circulating at the time. So guys, stay tuned for that. But before we get into the rest of this podcast, here's an ad from our sponsor, Spotify for Podcasters. All right, Jaren. So let's go ahead and spin the rumor mill first before we actually get into these Summer League affairs that the Mavericks have had the last few days. So first off, the Mavericks have not officially completed the sign and trade for Grant Williams, which is a very interesting aspect of all of this, because that gives them the potential maybe that gives credence to the fact that they might be opening or expanding up the deal a little bit. So that's definitely something to monitor. Obviously, we covered in the last podcast Matisse Thybulle's offer sheet getting matched and essentially what that constitutes, and talked a little bit about what the Mavericks might do next. It almost seems as if they're kind of playing the waiting game at this point. They have finalized all their other moves in terms of re-signing Dwight Powell, making the Kings trade with Rashawn Holmes official. Of course, making the I don't know if they've made the Seth Curry official signing yet.
It's not official. We don't have a dollar amount.
Nor the
Dante Exum.
the Dante Exum one, but everything else they have indeed made official, as well as Kyrie signing. And shout out to Kyrie, he signed with Anta today.
Yes, absolutely.
He's finally got his new shoe brand from a pretty prominent Asian shoe company, I believe. Some other NBA players were with them for a while. I can't remember if it was D Wade was with them or if he was with another one, but he's over there spearheading the brand. Is going to get his own signature shoes now. They're like their creation executive officer or something like that. So good for him after his fallout with Nike and everything. But obviously the Mavericks are trying to leave the door open, probably to have a little bit of flexibility here. But conversely, a lot of fans are also overreacting, given that there really hasn't been anything going on in the NBA, despite there being a few restricted free agents available, as well as a lot of trades potentially still poised to happen that have yet to happen. And a lot of fans are kind of getting down, thinking that this is going to be the final product that the Mavericks put out for the summer. And I wouldn't say I'm split necessarily 50-50 that the Mavericks are, just completely done. And I am holding on to, just as much hope as I am thinking that, the converse is true. But, just given revisionist history, granted it was with a, different regime multiple times, of course, that the Mavericks over the last few years have, been in a position to at least make other moves or seem like they're going to make other moves. And, they haven't in off season after off season. So, I would say I'm of the opinion, I'm probably about like 75% sure that they're going to still do something. All sort of signs point towards them waiting for some of these bigger trades to fall out to see, if any guys get bought out, if they have any other better options with their mid-level exception or the rest of it, if they choose to save the biannual exception for next year and pencil in Seth Curry with about 1/4 of the mid-level exception. They have some different options there, and then just find another wing and then maybe bring in that sort of highly touted stopgap center that we keep on talking about, or Clint Capella. I guess he's been the only sort of feasible guy in trade rumors besides DeAndre Ayton and the whole proposed Tim Hardaway Jr. and Rashawn Holmes package for DeAndre Ayton that Mark Stein says wasn't really all as close in terms of it coming into fruition as we think. But Tim McMahon says that the Mavericks sort of bucked out on that deal. There's just a lot of conflicting reports of interest. But one staple right now, I think, even, with some of those national guys like Mark Stein and Tim McMahon, is that, I think the Mavericks are still in a position to make moves. And I think they honestly kind of expect at least the Mavericks to do something. Now, I don't think any of them have said as much that it's a surefire sort of process here in terms of the Mavericks being able to acquire another big or another wing. I don't think that everybody is operating the assumption that that's a done deal, but I think at least a lot of the sentiment of all, sort of revolving around right now is that they would at least be pretty smart to, cash in on this sort of window with, only 2 more years left of Kyrie Irving. Obviously, you can make the argument that yes, like they need a developmental curve and it's probably, smarter for the Mavericks to wait for the trade deadline, but there is also a continuity aspect of this, and good teams aren't just made in one year. Even if the Mavericks were to throw all the theoretical pieces together to build a contender this year, there's no guarantee that team would have enough, synergy and that they would be synchronized enough with each other to come and win a championship year one. Simply because they haven't played with each other long enough, and the Mavericks have had a lot of continuity over the last few years, except for this offseason, but they haven't had a lot of good continuity in the post-Dirk era. When you're looking at a lot of these teams, none of them have been, 50 plus wins for multiple seasons, maybe barring last year's or the year before last now with the 2022 playoffs and then the 2021 playoffs the year before where the Mavericks were, finally starting to build something, but they weren't able to finalize the, last chess pieces on the board with that roster and add on to Jalen Brunson, and they weren't able to capitalize upon their continuity there. And so, they're essentially flipping the script now And I do think that to give themselves the best odds possible to win a championship in at least the guaranteed Kyrie window, because, hopefully he, comes back after 2 years, whether that's, in a lesser role throughout the latter half of his career or what, I don't really know. But, for his sake and, how good of a player he is, we obviously hope he comes back after just those 2 guaranteed years, but he only does have those 2 guaranteed years. So they, do need to capitalize. And I think that they know that. I think that they know, like Mark Stein reported, that they are probably still poised to go get another center, at least, that they haven't addressed their offseason issues to a premium as much as they would have hoped. But that's not to say that they won't do it, or, that this sort of moratorium period where we're kind of waiting out to see what's going to happen wasn't a planned thing. The Matisse Thybulle thing from their perspective almost seemed like a sort of a pipe dream if they could get both of those guys. So, I mean, I'm definitely, haven't lost hope or anything like that, but I do understand, the worrisome nature of a lot of fans right now, but I, do want to at least, encourage everybody to enjoy Summer League, enjoy what's happening with the Mavericks right now, and be excited for the moves that have happened, because, this team did at least improve pretty marginally, even if they don't do anything. Obviously we'll apply our criticisms when the off season is done if they don't do anything, but that, shouldn't hinder, excitement at the end of the day. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to tell anybody how to fan. I just want to, encourage everybody to at least appreciate what we do have, but we can for sure still apply, criticism as needed. So, that's essentially my take on it, but there haven't really been too many rumors outside of, a lot of sort of fringe trade buzz that's been going on that hasn't really been all too credibly sourced. There's been some stuff with Bojan Bogdanovic, Clint Capella that's kind of came out from different guys, more so like beat writers or guys that are specifically covering other teams, like, Hawks, locked in guys, like guys that are locked in with the Pistons have been saying stuff like that, but there hasn't really been anybody on a national level saying anything all too credible, other than Mark Stein saying that the Mavericks probably will still make some other moves this offseason. So, stay tuned for that, Jaren. But is there anything else from a rumors perspective that you would like to touch up on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you pretty much touched up. I mean, I know Dalton Trigg released a pretty good sort of 5-team deal that would kind of surface that Grant Williams trade back into a topic. Because again, it hasn't been finalized. There still could be potential works there that the Mavericks are possibly doing. I'm not, really too sure what's happening behind closed doors, but there could possibly be something happening. And that's kind of what Dalton Trigg sort of brought up in his latest article, as I mentioned, talking about that 5-team trade. But outside of that, I don't think that there's been anything too credible. I mean, there was a whole PJ Washington thing for about, 2 hours a few days ago, and that quickly dissolved.
It was like a 2-3 day cycle, but it was like only 2 hours in terms of people actually believing.
Yeah. And then, it very quickly dissolved. But
I mean, that's still a situation to monitor, given that it does seem like he's poised to take the qualifying offer with Charlotte, seeing that he obviously has not been impressed with whatever offer sheets they've gave him or whatever offers they've tried to throw at him. But, it also is somewhat of an unlikely scenario, just given how talented of a player he is, and how, Charlotte would want to keep that guy, somebody of that caliber, regardless if they have a logjam at that position, just due to the ability to, flip him for another asset. But, as of right now, they seem like they're setting themselves up to lose him in restricted free agency, unrestricted free agency next year. So that's an interesting sort of aspect there. But there's a lot of stuff that I, don't necessarily know what's going to happen. I think the Mavericks have been operating with a little bit more of a closed mouth policy as an organization. Ever since Nico Harrison stepped into office, there's been a lot more smoke screens, a lot more sort of doing exactly what, doing exactly what not has been reported versus doing what's reported. In the Donnie Nelson era, it was more like, the reports, you would just hear nothing until
until it happened.
But Nico does, has featured a lot of posturing, a lot of smoke screens, and, to see some of these like guys that are typically more plugged into the Mavericks on a national level, not specifically Mark Stein, because, he's really plugged in, but like Tim McMahon be wrong on a few of these things has been kind of funny. But enough with our rant about the rumor mill and stuff like that. We're going to be doing stuff like that almost every podcast for the rest of the summer, at least giving you guys a little up-to-date news roundabout until the Mavericks don't make any trades going into training camp, and we're all just depressed on a absolute macro scale, and we want to cry our eyes into pillows with the White Pal starting at center again, forget another season. And don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on Dwight Powell. I'm just saying, from an organizational perspective, I do think that the Mavericks would be committing some atrocities if that were to occur. But that's not me hating on Dwight Powell, the player. For everybody in the Dwight Powell fan club, because I know it's very prominent on Twitter right now. I love the guy earnestly. I love what he brings to the city. I love his energy and his work ethic. I just don't think that he should be the stopgap starting center. But conversely, I'm not saying that it's D-Day if Dwight Powell's the starting center at the beginning of the season. I don't think all hell's going to break loose. I don't think that it downplays some of the good moves that this team has already made. I'm just saying that I would obviously be preferential to them still doing stuff, and I will be critical if he is a starting center, but I'm not going to just say that they've fielded the worst starting center in NBA history. You guys have to have some sort of middle ground with the whole Dwight Powell situation, but I don't want to appeal to everybody any longer. I've done my Dwight Powell spill that I do every pod to try to appease both sides of the totem pole in terms of the absolute just Dwight Powell should never exist club, as well as the beloved fan base. So I'm one of the few people existing in that middle ground in an abyss of nothing. But otherwise, Jaren, these last two summer league games have been exciting. Also, definitely, I think an aspect of realism has sort of been introduced with them, given all the hype with the rookies and stuff like that, seeing how these guys are actually faring on the court, seeing their flaws, not just seeing a draft scouting video. Me and you were obviously pretty limited in our ability to watch both of these guys in terms of, watching whole on games of them last year or anything like that, given that we only really ramped up our coverage of them leading up to the draft, but we've obviously talked about how highly touted these guys are, how much they could potentially even make a day one impact for the Mavericks. And, that has, I don't think that my excitement has necessarily been hampered, but it has been nice, honestly, to recognize some of the flaws in these guys' games, because you get to see them on more of a larger scale, and it's easier to identify, and it gives me a little bit more of a known sort of aspect here of what the Mavericks are going to be looking at heading into training camp with. So let's just start with the rookies first off. What have you been impressed by with Dereck Lively as well as Omax so far this summer league, and what have you not been impressed by within those first two games against OKC and Philadelphia?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that does stick out to me about both those guys, for a matter of fact, is defense. This was, of course, something that, has been highly talked about. You would be living under a rock if you didn't know their primary strengths. But yeah, with Omax in particular, his ability to, be out in the perimeter, defend guys one-on-one, even be so switchable to the fact that he's gotten multiple steals off of blitzing sort of, high screen pick and rolls, or, getting some cross-court steals, whatever it is. He's been a very switchable defender, and that's something that, I kind of knew after watching, or I guess doing my limited homework on him pre-draft, not pre-draft, but post-draft. But look, I mean, it's something that's really fun to see, like I said. But yeah, I liked what I saw on the defensive side of things. He brought a lot more versatility than I thought he could, a lot more leadership also. I think his ability to be vocal, that was one thing that kind of stuck out to me in the Oklahoma City game more so, was just his ability to be vocal, be kind of, one of the main guys on the court, be heard. I know in a filled stadium, or filled arena rather, we're probably not going to hear those things, but in the summer league, we can at least hear him or hear the guys sort of communicate and everything. And it's good to hear his voice be some of the loudest ones. So that was, something that was very little that kind of stuck out to me. But on the offensive end, just being, where he's needed, whether it's corner threes, he's had a lot of offensive rebounds, a lot of second chance possessions. And that's something that, coming into the league, I think was something that on the offensive end stuck out to a lot of scouts. And, definitely through 2 games of summer league, we've seen a lot of that. But look, we're going to have to see a lot more from a self-creating standpoint. I don't think he has very many turnovers, but to that point, he hasn't gotten the ball a whole lot to create. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that going forward. I don't know if we'll have an extra summer league game going on, because I believe it's 4 guaranteed.
No, it's 5 guaranteed.
Oh, it's 5. Okay. So
you get a consolation.
yeah, I guess you get
game
one. Yeah, you get one
if you don't make the playoffs.
So yeah, I guess 5 guaranteed. So at some point, I would like to see him with the rock a little bit, see him sort of break down guys, see him get to the paint a little bit. We haven't seen enough of that. But from our point now, with pretty much, I think 4 or 5 days now of, training with the guys and 2 games, of course, I've liked what I've seen, and look, these teams aren't complete. These guys were pretty much put together within a 24-hour notice almost. And, they've only had about 4 days to play with each other before the sort of summer league started. So look, we're not looking for perfect basketball out of these players, but from that perspective, I would like to see more on the offensive end out of Omax. But from what we have seen from the effort standpoint, from the defensive side of the ball, and of course on offense, for what little we have seen, I've really liked what I've seen. Well, I know you want to talk about Dereck Lively, so go ahead.
Yeah, but I was going to touch up on Omax a little bit. I think that the biggest drawing point for me is definitely the effort, and I just didn't really know how uber energetic of a guy he was. I mean, if an opposing team's, inbounding the ball after a Mavericks made basket, like he got a steal right off of that for an easy dunk in the Philadelphia game, stuff like that, just making all the little intangible sort of hustle plays, high IQ plays, and doing so effectively and not taking any plays off and doing it time in and time out again. That's been the thing that's impressed me most, because the pace of the NBA game can definitely be a suffering point for a lot of young players. And, you see them get undisciplined and stuff like that. This guy has been probably easily the best, I think, from a holistic perspective. I think the best defensive player on the Mavericks Summer League team. He's in that first game was able to switch on to Chet a few times, guard him out on the perimeter, force him into a tough mid-range jump shot one time, uses his length to the best of his ability against centers. He's at a size disadvantage, and that has hurt him a few times. And there were a few times where there were some, quicker, shiftier guards around like 6 foot, 6'1". You see a lot more smaller guards in summer leagues that necessarily haven't been able to make it up to the higher ranks. That did get by him a few times, but other than that, his on-ball defense, his ability to move his hips, his discipline in terms of not, biting on pump fakes, not biting on, pass fakes or ball fakes or up fakes, any of that stuff is really advanced. And, and from an energy perspective and from, a rotational perspective on defense, being able to switch when needed. He's been one of the better Mavericks at veer switching. When possessions start to, sort of go haywire and you have to make a sort of last, minute switch. He's just a really instinctual defender, very much a huge ball hawker on defense. I would almost relate him to a safety or a cornerback in terms of his ability to play the passing lanes, but then he's like a linebacker in terms of, almost like playing the run, the way that the guy stays connected to a guy's hip and is tracking the ball handler. He's really impressed me. He has, potential, 1 through 5 versatility on the defensive end, the NBA level. I don't know if he can do that day one, but that he's definitely a guy that can get there. It looks like he's added some weight onto his frame since he wrapped up his time at Marquette. I've been really impressed with what he's done from a defensive perspective, and from an offensive perspective, it has looked a little raw, and we haven't got to see him featured too prominently. He's been playing, pretty strictly as a 3-and-D wing, but I love his movement off of missed shots. He's always following his shot. Anytime that there's an offensive rebound, he cuts immediately to the rim. When a possession's dead, getting late in the shot clock, he always does a 45 cut or cuts on the baseline and, stuff like that. Coming off, there was a few times in that Philadelphia game they ran some like little cross screen action for him to get the ball, about 10 feet away from the basket. He elected not to shoot it, but he had some opportunities maybe get downhill. I don't know. I like the way that they're using him right now. As the minutes increase, I hope the usage rate and the Omax attacking off closeouts and maybe potentially handling the ball a little bit, sort of dosage increases a little bit. But as it currently stands, he's probably impressed me and been the most NBA ready guy day one for the Mavericks so far in summer league, and definitely has the most translatable game to the NBA level. Even if he's not shooting the three at a high clip, I mean, he's a guy that can come in and play really good, surefire ball hawking defense on all levels. So I've really liked that. He has me really excited. But the 3-point shot, and he hasn't shot a ton of threes in summer league, so I'm not going to be too judgmental, because he did make one or two that first game, and I don't think he made one the second game. But the form does not look bad at all. His free throw does have this weird little sort of hitch, but I think that if he is going to shoot at the rate that he was sort of at the NBA Combine, that jolted him up in a lot of those scouts progressions into that first round, thrusted him into the first round. If he can continue, to shoot at that sort of clip, he'll be a guy that, could even potentially be a fringe starter for the Mavericks. Will at least definitely be in the rotation. But I do think how, good that three ball is going to definitely carry over in terms of how much he'll be featured his rookie year. I think that that's one thing that we definitely learned because of how much more, integral shooting is at the NBA level versus when you're just looking at these guys trying to get them some run for development and the games don't matter as much. But, to move on to Dereck Lively, look, you can obviously see the potential there just strictly with the frame. A lot of guys, particularly centers that are in that 6'11" to 7 foot range, they may be an inch or two shorter than they actually are listed at. This guy's like a legit 7'1", 230, and he is mobile. He's not quite as like tall as like a KP or a Wembanyama, to where the injury questions sort of start to prevail, and you're extremely scared over the way that he moves given his size. It is really natural, especially for a center. He jumps off 2 feet, and it is just really that prototypical rim protecting five that it could be poised to be a really good rim runner. And we've seen all the flashes, but conversely, we have seen a lot of cons that he will have to improve upon. But he's only 19, so that he can definitely improve upon those areas very easily. Working with Tyson Chandler is a great deal for him, as we've obviously said on this podcast. And staying within the Mavericks developmental system, this guy could be a very special player, especially if he's ever able to develop that shot one day. He airballed his 1-3 he's took in summer league so far, but I do have hope that he'll make at least one, before the summer league's over. Hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. It's not a definite idea.
After that last one, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I know that he shoots it at a good, or not a good clip, but a good clip, at least in, individual workouts from what we've heard. But I think he was 14% at Duke. So there's not a lot of credence to that argument, but I would hope that we get to see one. So
yes. And it's also been interesting to see a guy that was shooting a lot of threes in summer league, but wasn't making them last year, even though he was sort of marketed as this 3-and-D center, and Marcus Bingham not really played all. The Mavericks are either playing extremely small in these games, or they're rolling with Lively at the 5. They're rolling with like Braxton Key or like Taze Moore basically in the center position. In some of these sort of later closing.
We got Chris Silva.
Yeah, we got Chris Silva, but he didn't close the game.
Yeah, he didn't close the game.
He played better in the 76ers
he played a lot better, but still
he was just a lot more limited in his minutes. But we'll get to the rest of the guys later in the podcast, and we'll touch up on them some, as well as how the actual games fared. But we definitely will not go as in depth into them as we do with our normal regular season games for our regular listeners who listen to our post game press coverage. Well, not press coverage, but our post game coverage after games this year, and our pods on that, where we dissected the whole game, with there really not being anything else to talk about but the game. There's a lot more at play to talk about with the development of these guys. And I think Jaren and I, looking back at how some of our summer league podcasts were a year ago, where we just dissected
the whole game. We did player profiles for
yeah.
basically everybody on the
Yeah, I
team too.
know.
So
Yeah, we definitely need to be a little less niche in how in depth we're going there, but nonetheless, with Dereck Lively, like I was talking about, he houses all the prototypical features of that rim protecting, rim running five that is so coveted in the NBA, especially if they can shoot nowadays. We saw in that OKC game just how good the shot blocking ability was, his ability to slide his feet over and be a weak side rim protector. But in that 76ers game, conversely, we saw a lot of guys attacking off closeouts, getting downhill. The 76ers had, I think, as good as that Thunder roster was, the 76ers offense was heavily conducive to Traquavion Smith and God, I'm bluffing on this guy's name. DJ Stewart.
Stewart,
And both of those guys getting downhill, they had some real lengthy, fast, shifty guards, and they were putting their bodies into Dereck Lively. And while Dereck Lively was keeping his hands straight up, he was sliding into the right position. Maybe a second too late, but nothing to where he wasn't just blatantly missing rotations. But he was kind of just getting bodied and getting scored on, despite even some decent contest. Even that one time in transition where the 76ers big man was able to get like a left-hand layup over
from Gonzaga.
Yes,
that was like 45 times. Yeah.
Petrusic. That's what his name was. Stuff like that. And you see where some of the NBA intangibles might not be there yet. With him maybe needing to put on a little bit muscle. He's got some decent size to him, but as fast as some of those guys come downhill onto centers, with that much force, and you basically having to stay straight up as a rim protector, that's not an easy task to do. And we saw him get bodied a couple times despite keeping his hands high. Stuff like that, that's going to just take time to develop on. Being more explosive, using your strength in tandem with your verticality, and not strictly relying on your verticality to be able to make plays at times. But even in that 76ers game, you see how light he is on his feet, how promising that this guy is to be able to switch on to ones and twos at times. While that's not necessarily something that I'm sure he'll be able to do in every scenario, particularly with some of the point of attack ball handlers in the NBA. I mean, it's something that he can do from time to time and certain occasions, and that was really impressive to me. And the defense has been very flashy, but there have been some negatives there. Offensively, he has looked good as a rim runner, besides one of the more integral parts of being a rim runner, which is setting a screen. And this is something that we talked a lot about in some of his pre-draft stuff, that he is not a guy that has been able to anchor down and set steady screens. He certainly probably has the ability to do it, especially when he adds a little bit of strength. And we've seen have a couple good screens in summer league, but it is good, especially if the Mavericks are starting some of their actions well above the break, to where Jaden can get downhill and Dereck Lively can use his athleticism to run after guys. But as much as you're going to get blitzed in the NBA, there's not going to be as much of there's the lack of traps and double teams to stop specific guys in summer league is definitely not something that coaches are going to. They're just trying to mix in certain zone aspects, certain man zone aspects, and of course to see how their guys are doing in a regular man scheme, switching, playing in weak and drop coverage, stuff like that. They're trying to see how their guys are just going to fit in regular NBA defenses before they really open up the toolbox and start throwing traps and double teams at guys to see how they'll react, because hedging and recovering. Because I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of these guys aren't even going to be on the Mavericks roster, aren't going to need to know this scheme, and they don't have a whole lot of time to be able to develop that stuff. So it's pretty rudimentary, basic sort of stuff that they're running here. But Dereck Lively, still, while he can kind of feature that athleticism in certain scenarios, there will be times where in the NBA where he's going to need to set a really solid screen to negate a ball handler, being able, or a point of attack defender rather, being able to like hedge and recover to totally mess up a lob pass. He's going to need to do that to set a little bit more spacing. Obviously, times that there will be times where he needs to slip and not set as hard of a screen. I think he's done a really good job diagnosing when to do that, because I mean kind of just does it every
Yeah,
time. So
pretty much.
yeah, I mean, when he does need to slip and, you know, say the ball handler is getting pressured a little bit harder, and, you know, he has more of a clear path to the rim without necessarily needing to, you know, set a hard, you know, anchored down screen. I mean, yeah, he's doing good at that, but, you know, especially with the pacing that Luka operates, not necessarily always just being a guy that's going to go straight downhill, snaking the pick and roll a lot, relying on that screen to, you know, get defenders on his hip oftentimes. That's going to be a huge part of his offensive game and something he needs to develop. And, you know, I really love what I've seen from a rebounding perspective. He boxes out really well, goes up, grabs the ball with 2 hands. That's not even something I really have a question about. I've been really impressed with that. I mean, this is a guy that, you know, I think once, you know, the fundamentals start to come into fruition for him, I mean, one day in his NBA career could screw around and get a triple-double with blocks or something like that.
Absolutely.
He's a guy like that. I mean, he has the potential is off the charts. What I've learned in this last few games, and the athleticism is even more explosive than, you know, I even thought. You know, some of those clips from Duke last year, it almost, you know, looked like he was kind of taking it easy on the rim sometimes, you know, when he had enough space, just because of some of those college guys just simply can't even go up and contest a guy with that sort of size. But I mean, he's throwing down some ferocious dunks, going up hard for rebounds. I don't know exactly where he projects developmentally. You know, we talked a little bit about earlier in the pod, or maybe this was off air. I can't remember specifically, but, you know, Tim McMahon reported that he's a guy that may see a lot, you know, just as much time in the G League as, you know, as he does on the main roster. I don't know if I'm necessarily, you know, of that sentiment, especially his training camp have yet to hit. I do think that him spending some time in the G League, especially at the start of his tenure with the Mavericks, is going to be really beneficial for him. You know, especially given a lot of young big men, even in the lottery, like Mark Williams, has spent good time in the G League and then came out to be productive players at the latter half of their rookie year. He's going to need that. This is going to be a guy that probably gets better throughout the first few years of his career. You know, but it's not going to be a day one sort of deal where he's going to be his holistic version of himself. Now, could he get to a position this season where he's good enough to start? Absolutely. I don't think that he's going to be able to do that day one until, you know, he's able to get mentored from Mavericks players and staff and, you know, be able to work on some of the, you know, those intangibles in terms of fine tuning his screening ability, you know, being a little bit better rotationally on defense, you know, reacting harder on some of those, you know, times when a ball handler gets beat and he has to, you know, come out strong for, you know, a weak side contest or something like that, and just adding strength. I think he's going to need to work on all of that, of course, and, you know, as well as continue shooting the basketball to see where that could go, because that could really turn the tide in terms of how good this guy could be in his NBA career one day. But look, I mean, the potential is there. It's off the charts. I don't think that, you know, he's necessarily just limited to being a guy that's, you know, going to be a fringe rotation center and playing just as much time in the G League as he does with the main roster. I think he could very well just get some G League run this year and play a decent amount with the main roster, probably progressively more and more as he gets better. And I'm really encouraged by how hard of a worker this guy seems to be in all of his intangibles as a young man, stuff like that. He looks, you know, he's the perfect type of guy that you'd like to come in and get mentored by, like a Tyson Chandler. But, you know, these last 2 games have shown the sort of ebb and flow of, you know, how volatile he kind of is, you know, as young as he is and as raw as he is, especially with not having got to practice with these guys ad nauseum, not even really getting a full practice with them maybe until that last day where he was cleared to go. There's a lot of intricacies in his game he's still going to have to hash out. And I wouldn't even say he's as NBA ready as Omax is these last couple games, but, you know, has he impressed and shown a lot of flashes to where I'm encouraged to see how his rookie year goes? Because I mean, I really don't know how it's going to go exactly, but I do think, you know, he could be a rotation player for the Mavericks at the end of the day. I mean, yes, I'm very encouraged by that. So this summer league has just been really exciting to watch. I liked how he stayed competitive, even, you know, when there have been some discouraging sort of happenings in certain games, like him getting scored on multiple times, you know, kind of getting his head down a little bit, but being able to pick himself back up. You know, closing out the game the other night with Philadelphia, he did a good job. You know, he's a guy that where his confidence doesn't get wavered, and I like his persistency, because a lot of young big men tend to get really down on themselves when they're playing bad and stuff like that. So that's been something I've really enjoyed.
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually going to bring that point up.
Yeah.
Just the sort of effect on offense, I've noticed a few times, not often because again, there hasn't been a huge sample size, but speaking to his confidence, he may set a screen and roll off that. He might not get the ball the first time, but if the possession is still alive, whether it's Jaden Hardy or Mike Miles or someone like that, dribbling the ball at the top, he's not afraid to go set a second screen. And that's something that I feel like a lot of young big men
Now he doesn't actually set a screen.
Oh, well,
making
okay,
contact.
well, a slip, rather.
A slip, yeah.
But he's not afraid to go set a second screen. I feel like for a lot of young big men, if it doesn't work the first time, they're not going to go for a second time, and usually they'll either hang on the opposite side of the dunker spot, or they might just go divert into a sort of mid-range sort of spot. But he's very active, a very solid mover on offense, and that's something that I think is very good, and it's something that he can work on. And if he can, of course, develop an outside shot, that'll only benefit him even more. But look, also to his athleticism, which you pointed out, one thing that I kind of wrote on his player profile was, that he was a little bit more immobile, rather. But that's something that has definitely been disproven, rather. And I think his ability to switch has definitely made that sort of disproved. But look, I think he can guard the perimeter, and that's something that is very key.
In spots.
In spots, absolutely. Yeah, he's not going to be a full perimeter defender. I'm not trying to say that, but the center that Philly was sort of playing, I can't remember his name, but he's from Gonzaga. Petrusev, there you go. He was much more of a sort of 3-point work inside kind of guy. Occasionally he would be inside already, but whenever he got the ball. But Dereck Lively had to sort of space himself out, how to defend the 3-point shot a little bit here and there, and that's something that I really did notice. And he did a really good job of that. He did get beat a little bit, whether it was flipping his hips. Because again, he was switched on some of those, faster guards like Javonte Smart or Javon, whatever he was
Jaquavion Smith.
Yeah, Jaquavion Smith. Yeah. Whether it was some of those guys, he had the ability to flip his hips. But look, those are things as a young center, you're only going to learn, you're only going to get better at. So those were sort of a few things that stuck out to me to touch up on. But yeah, I'm really impressed with what I've seen from Dereck Lively.
I would say, despite, like I talked about earlier, like, getting to further analyze these guys, yes, you get to see their flaws, but actually seeing, tangible, Mavericks summer league basketball from these guys and seeing like the things that they do good at makes me excited. I'm not really, unless the negatives are, completely just downright awful, to the point where we should be a little bit concerned. I'm not concerned about, Dereck Lively getting, 5 fouls in a summer league in the first half or whatever it was. Just, half of them were like ticky-tacky anyways, like stuff like that. Like you kind of let it slide, but those are going to be, facets of his game, particularly defensively, being in position just a little bit earlier, staying a little bit more vertical and adding strength so he doesn't get pushed around and get, caught up in those ticky-tacky calls that he's going to need to improve upon. But I mean, even furthermore, like a couple things before we wrap up talking about him that kind of impressed me that it failed to mention. His offensive rebounding, I mean, I know it said his rebounding, but particularly, he goes after balls. I mean, he's a real hustle guy. He's not a guy. I thought there may be some sort of effort questions after, seeing some of his tape at Duke, like kind of Jaren said, not immobile, but he did kind of, take just the easier route, wasn't, throwing dunks down with a ton of authority. There weren't like a whole lot of clips of him like diving for loose balls, but I mean, he's really putting it all out there for the Mavericks. And another really interesting aspect of him is his ability to play make out of the short roll. And he's had a few of those really good swing passes to the corners when they, the low man rotates over and they bring help to where, two guys are on him coming downhill. He reads that really well for a center and gets rid of it. Now, hopefully at one point of his career, maybe he can just kind of sidetrack that and still go over a guy, use his size to his advantage a little bit more. And he's obviously very raw offensively outside of, his jump shot that works 15% of the time at game speed, and his his ability to be a lob threat, and a guy that's a putback finisher. But look, I mean, he made a little post hook the other day. He did. The more he's able to develop offensively, and I think Tyson will work on that with him, given that Tyson, was probably, even though he didn't have the most expansive offensive game, he was just really good with inside 3 feet. And I think given the modern day NBA, he's going to want to sort of vet no, I was gonna say Victor. I don't know why. He's gonna want to vet Dereck to get up to speed. With the modern NBA big, he's gonna want to hone in on his shooting as well as the rest of the Mavs developmental staff. So I mean, everybody should be very encouraged from what they've seen the last 2 games from both of these guys. Really Max too. I mean, his ability to step day one as a rotation player. Seeing that is actually something that's going to come to fruition. Versus something that we were more so just sort of throwing out into the air as a possibility is something that has been really exciting. So, those were the 2 guys we wanted to hit the nail on the head, obviously the most, but we will get into everybody else, of course. The last sort of segment will be wrapping up, some of the guys that have kind of impressed us, like Taze Moore and Brandon Randolph. We'll talk about them a little bit more. Jordan Walker, and we'll get into how the games actually went, but we're not going to go, the full-fledged deep dive, expansive mainstream Mavs.
This time of year
cover of the, we might, but we do have some things to do. So hopefully we don't do that and extend this already pretty long podcast another hour, but we will do our best. But next up, Jaden, let's get into some of the guys that are returning to this Mavericks Summer League roster from last year. Starting off with Jaden Hardy. What have you took in from his Summer League, sophomore debut, and what he's been able to provide to the table? He's obviously been the Mavericks' leading scorer, but he hasn't just been a guy that has came into Summer League and you have this sort of surefire notion in your head that he doesn't need this at all. Like, he doesn't need to be here. I mean, there still have been certain things that, I think that he's benefited from in terms of gaining experience. Yeah. What have you noticed?
Yeah, absolutely. There was, I guess, a sort of expectation coming into this Summer League for Jaden Hardy. And relatively, I think he's lived up to, outside of the efficiency and, those sort of talks, he has had glimpses of that. But look, one thing that's kind of stuck out to me from sort of like a leadership standpoint is his ability to lead this team. He was the sort of front catalyst into that comeback down 15, of course. He was that front guy. I think he scored 12 or so, and most of that coming from the free throw line, but I think he scored 12 or so in that fourth quarter, which of course, was a team high in that fourth quarter. So I think his ability to sort of lead this team is something that shouldn't go, untalked about and, untouched. And, that's something that I'm going to take very highly because, again, he's going to have to be one of those main scorers off the bench for this Mavericks unit in year 2. So, his ability to lead this team is going to be something that we'll probably have to see in year 2 for him. So I definitely do want to touch up on that a little bit. But just his ability to also get to the free throw line. We saw that in glimpses in large part last year, but we didn't see it in full effect. And this, last night in particular, I think he got to the free throw line 13 or 14 times, knocking down 12 of 13, I believe was the full number. And yeah, I mean, he was just really efficient from the free throw line. His ability to contort his body, sort of flail almost and get to the free throw line, and it's not sort of flopping effects. These are like actual real fouls that he's drawing. That's something that definitely shouldn't go unnoticed. I think he's done a really good job of that. He's definitely made a huge step, in my opinion, in that year 2. I think that there's a sort of expectation for year 2 Summer League guys that they should just sort of come in and instantly in a game or two, pull off a Keegan Murray where he drops like 46 or 41, whatever it was. And for some guys, it's just not the truth. For Jaden Hardy, I think he does need this. But look, I think that we are learning a lot about what he could potentially be doing next year for this Mavericks team. I don't think that there's anything different. I'm sure you have some different opinions. I haven't really noticed anything different from his game. Whether it's offensively or defensively, other than just sort of rounding out his skills, getting better at the small intangible things. And like I said, one thing I guess that has kind of stuck out is getting to the free throw line, as I pointed out before. He's doing that at a higher clip. And in that first game, I think he shot 3 of 4 or 3 or 5 from the 3-point line, something like that. And he had much more of an efficient game in that first one rather than the second one. So outside of that, I really liked what he's done, especially from a leadership standpoint, as I pointed out. But look, I like what Jaden Hardy's doing, being the sort of front runner on this Mavericks Summer League team, and of course leading them from that 15-point deficit, and of course coming back a pretty big marginal win for this unit. So I liked what I've seen out of Jaden Hardy.
Yeah, I think one thing that has impressed me the most, honestly, is his shooting. Strictly from when he came into the Mavericks system, and even that, going back to that his time with the G League Ignite. I mean, he's evolved into a guy that's like a really, really good shooter, even off the catch or off the bounce. And even though he had sort of a rougher shooting game the other night in summer league against 76ers, I mean, a lot of his misses were really close misses, in and outs, or almost bouncing in, stuff like that. And he just looks more comfortable in that position, shooting off the bounce, and his ability to pull up in the mid range, stuff like that. I mean, is been really impressing me. I feel like he's getting to his spots as a shooter off the bounce a lot better, and just looks a lot more confident with his stroke. There's just not a lot of bad misses compared to what we saw, throughout it, the first part of his rookie year and in last summer league. A lot of these misses are really good. So that's why I do think he has potential to pop off for like a 40-point game one of these games, so we'll just have to kind of see. But I mean, to cycle back to what he kind of needs to work on, the reason I feel like he is in summer league at the moment, I mean, obviously, I think first off is kind of his pacing and his offensive awareness, right? I think Jaden is, very dynamic attacking downhill, and he's very shifty, very herky-jerky. He really gets into your grill as a ball handler and makes you have to flip your hips at the last second to try and recover to get back to him. But a couple sort of points of interest that I think that Jared Dudley, talked about. He was even in that OKC game, was trying to get, Jaden Hardy to expand upon a little bit more. It was almost kind of a focus for a game, just because it's a summer league game, and, given how good Hardy is, was his playmaking. And, he didn't do a terrible job of it in that OKC game, but Mavericks really weren't making a lot of shots in that game. And he subsequently, I can't remember, he barely had any assists, but a lot of that was just due to, guys missing almost what seemed like every potential assist he was sort of just giving them on a platter. But I mean, it is what it is. It's just summer league. But I thought he did a good job at, reading how, the defender in the dunker spot's going to play, dictating where to, whether to, to have that corner pass or not. Doing a good job at, sort of trying to wrap around and get it to the big, on trying to draw that second defender to come over, when he's attacking downhill, giving a wraparound pass to a big, something like that. I thought he is starting to expand upon a little bit, like in that Thunder game. But then conversely, in that Philadelphia game in that first half, his pacing just looked kind of off. When you thought he should have gotten to actions a little bit quicker, tried to attack downhill a little bit more. And then conversely, when he should have, maybe took a little bit of steam off, he sees like a guy like Petrusev playing drop coverage. And, there are times where he's got to be able to, get a defender on his hip, over dribble, but not over dribble, if that makes sense. Like, understand, when he needs to maybe, take a back seat and, kind of snake the pick and roll and pull up for a floater, like stuff like that, is what Jaden Hardy is going to be, essential for him in terms of opening up that offensive repertoire a little bit more, because he can get heavy footed and just, try to drive into guys, time after time. And, eventually, that will come back to bite him at times, in games where he's drawing a lot of fouls, like that Philadelphia game. It was good down the stretch, but he wasn't getting some of those calls in that first half. And he was getting blocked some and went up with some, shots that you probably, should just pass out of in the first place. So I think just making the game more simplistic for him, understanding, when to do certain things offensively, whether it's reading and reacting from a playmaking perspective, seeing how a guy's going to rotate, as well as, how he's playing in the pick and roll, being able to just control his pacing, the way in which he's getting downhill, being able to, to go the wrong way, off a screen, snake a pick and roll. All those sort of things I think are definitely points of interest in terms of, what he's trying to get better at. And we've seen him struggle with it a little bit in summer league, but we've seen him, also be very good at that in summer league. So, like I said, I don't think it's the end of it for him in summer league. He hasn't played, just as insane as I would have hoped, but he's definitely held his own and played really well still. So I'm excited to see, with a little bit more basketball under his belt, and if this team gets a little more chemistry together, how he rounds out his trip in Vegas. If this guy, ends up, producing at a more efficient clip. But I mean, I've definitely, been impressed with what I've seen so far. And I think, defensively even, he's been a little bit better on ball.
Yeah.
We've still seen, there's still been a few instances, particularly off ball, where he gets caught, in no man's land on some of those rotations, and, has been late to rotate, and, his defender is able to attack off a closeout or something like that. But particularly as an on-ball defender, I thought he's honestly been doing pretty decent this summer league, unless he's matched up on, an unfair advantage where there's this, really, really smaller shifty guard, or, a guy that's, just too big for him, that's too dynamic. So that's basically my full coverage. And I mean, those are the three guys that we're obviously going to go the deepest on, but, I have really liked what I've seen from him. Did you have any other lasting thoughts on him?
Yeah, not necessarily on Jaden Hardy. Like I said, I have liked what I've seen. I haven't really seen too many negatives other than, an inefficient game too. But outside of that, I've really been impressed with what I've seen. A guy that, I had pretty high expectations for in his second summer league. He was, of course, with the Mavericks last year, AJ Lawson. What have you seen from him? Me personally, like I've said, I had high expectations from him. Those expectations so far through 2 games, and again, it is summer league. I don't think, you can't take too much of credence to this, but I've been kind of disappointed in my own rights. But I want to get your take on that. Like personally, like I said, I just haven't seen enough from him. I haven't seen a big, year 2 leap rather in that summer league from him.
Yeah, I mean, I do get that vantage point. I definitely wouldn't say I've been disappointed from him, but he hasn't wowed me, I guess. I still like, I honestly think the defense this summer league from him has been better.
Yeah.
You can tell he's at a little bit of size. He's defending, 3s and 4s at a little bit higher of a clip. He's looked really good rotationally. I mean, he's a guy who has like infinite stamina. He'll just sit around and chase a guy around the perimeter all day if he has to. He's got a few steals off that. He's been really good as an on-ball defender. So, I mean, from a defensive perspective, I honestly think he's improved a little bit. I've liked what he's done in terms of adding some size in the offseason. Offensively, yeah, he does have he's real explosive, and he's really fast, surprisingly, for, a guy that size, especially after, adding some noticeable muscle. But he does have a tendency to just get kind of one-dimensional with his offensive game. He's a good cutter, and he's a guy that attempts to definitely not be one-dimensional. But, there will be times where he's attacking off a closeout where it's just a straight line drive. There's no sort of shiftiness to it. And you would just hope that he could expand upon that a little bit, but just be a little bit more fluid offensively. And the shot hasn't been going in at the clip that we wanted, but he also hasn't had the highest usage rate either offensively. And he's done a really good job, getting, as a point of attack defender, getting like steals that have been leading to transition baskets. He's had a lot of transition baskets, a lot of transition dunks, stuff like that. So I've been impressed with him, but he definitely hasn't, done anything to where I'm putting him up on a pedestal above any of these other guys. I do think he, just given how good he is positionally and, his development in the Mavericks organization thus far, I don't think that they're letting him slip. I definitely think he either gets that last 2-way slot or makes the main roster, and it definitely is at least getting a training camp invite. But let's see how the last 3 summer league games sort of formulate here before I round out a whole opinion on his offensive game. If he does kind of look this dry offensively, and the 3 is just not hitting, he's not looking too good off the bounce, attacking off closeouts, and he's really only getting these transition baskets or easy dump off passes in the lane or something like that. And we get to the end of the summer league, and he averaged like 7 points in summer league. I definitely could have a totally different opinion, but he's done enough defensively through these first 2 games with getting, I think 5-6 steals probably between 2 games, to where I'm not really tripping out over some bad shooting performances so far. But that's kind of my thoughts on him. McKinley Wright, he had a weird sort of first game. I thought he just wasn't all too aggressive. It seemed like Hardy was delegated a lot more of the playmaking duties there, but In the second game, he looked really savvy. Was just doing a really good job in terms of his placing in the pacing in the pick and roll. And he's a guy that catches guys off guards because nobody thinks he's going to go up on a guy and he'll just spur up a finger roll all of a sudden. And he's very smart at getting downhill. He hasn't shot a whole lot, but he knocked in a 3 the other game.
He did.
He went out with that ankle injury, so we'll monitor that accordingly. Hopefully he's back for the last couple of games. It didn't look all too serious in it, but they did hold him out for the rest of that 76ers game after the third quarter. But he impressed me in that 76ers game. I was a little low on him after that first game, but he's running as fast as he can defensively, hustling for every loose ball, doing what he was doing in the NBA. Obviously, he's really good on those sort of like 6'2", 6'3" and under guys, but just naturally with his height, he is at a disadvantage defensively. So that's always kind of been a sticking point. And then, I'd be interested just, given we haven't seen him shoot a whole lot of threes, and the, defenders are going under on him a lot. They do seem like they've done their, scouting reports on him, particularly in that first game. I thought OKC played him really well. They went over the top and forced him into some tough spots, and he had to kind of get rid of the ball. But against Philadelphia, against some of their drop coverage they were running with Petrusev, he was able to get downhill, get some really good floaters. So, seeing that and seeing if I thought he's honestly been doing really good setting guys up as a playmaker. If he is shooting the ball at a high clip, that's going to be really intriguing for me heading into training camp to see how the Mavericks prioritize him, if he'll be back. If we get the same McKinley Wright, I could definitely see the Mavericks, valuing another position of need a little bit more over him. But overall, I would say that, in the same vein of AJ Lawson, where he's had one pretty good game and then one not totally bad game, but nothing crazy. He has not wowed me, but nothing out of the ordinary for him. And I've liked what I've seen for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of share the same sentiment. He hasn't wowed me necessarily, but I have been, fairly impressed with him, especially after that second game.
Yeah.
I mean, whether it's the sort of floater game, or even, from a defense perspective, I feel like he's honestly played pretty solid. But look, I think one thing, matchup dependent, he definitely could be more effective. Like in that, Philly game, he was playing much more smaller guards, much more skinnier guys. Rather in that Oklahoma City game, they have a lot of longer sort of guards and longer wings on that roster that they have currently constructed. So, I mean, I think it's much more matchup dependent on what he could possibly do. But yeah, I like what he did in that second game against Philly. Whether it was offensively, he got to his spots fairly easily rather. And I believe through 3 quarters, he was the Mavericks leading scorer, of course, until he went out with that ankles injury. So one thing that has kind of stuck out to me is he has looked like a vet, whether it is, to your point, setting up guys for open shots, or just, finding big men, down low. Yeah, like that is something that has really stuck out to me. But outside of that, I think, he has looked a little different. He hasn't looked like the same old McKinley Wright. Like, I feel like he's definitely improved on some things, but I don't think, personally, there isn't anything so far that has stuck out to me that I'm like, oh, we need him on this roster currently.
He's only shot like a couple threes, but he made one. So if he starts shooting a little bit better throughout summer league, I mean, that's definitely going to be a huge point of contention heading into training camp. So we'll go ahead and, see how that goes. I would say currently, I would probably, if I had to pick, say he wouldn't be back with the Mavericks on a 2-way deal or training camp, because I think they'll probably prioritize a wing or just
especially with Mike Miles.
Yeah, try to give another guard a shot. But I mean, it'll be interesting. And I mean, look, given how Mike Miles has played compared to McKinley Wright, it might end up, extending his 2-way.
Absolutely,
they can do that.
Yeah, they can. Yeah.
I mean, so we'll go ahead and see that. Let's just touch up on, some of the other guys. Those were all the, we talked about all the returners and the 2 more prominent rookies. We'll start with Mike Miles without going, too fully in depth. What have you been impressed by and not impressed by from the TCU guard, right down the street in Fort Worth in his, summer league debut for the Mavericks?
Absolutely. I would say I'm more so impressed than not impressed. I know that, a lot of fans probably would differ on that opinion. But he has made some very tough buckets, especially in that second game. He made some very clutch buckets. So look, I think that's something that's really stuck out to me. He's kind of came into the league with a title of being sort of a hard-nosed traditional point guard. And that's something that I've definitely seen through 2 games in the summer league. So I don't think that there's anything that's sort of different from that. I would like to see a little bit more of an outside shot. But look, I think his decisiveness is something that kind of kills his game almost. He doesn't really pass the ball a whole lot. He's kind of
Yeah.
going out there with something to prove, and it's
Yeah.
kind of killing his motive.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen,
That's a good point.
I haven't seen really anything, impressive from a playmaking standpoint. And yeah, I mean, outside of that, I
Yeah.
don't really have anything
Yeah,
else.
there were a couple times where he got himself into some like real sticky situations,
Yeah.
turned it over because of that. And I mean, he's been like kind of getting to his spots. You definitely see that he is more of a scorer
Absolutely.
at the point guard spot than a playmaker. But I do think that some more reps as a lead ball handler, we could see that change. He hasn't looked really too terrible on defense, but he definitely, I would say, has trouble keeping up with just lengthier guys. There were especially in that Philadelphia game, I thought he held his own for sure in that Thunder game, but that in Philadelphia game, he was getting scored on quite a bit.
Yeah.
And his defense, he was getting kind of bodied to the rim and stuff. So, he's going to need to at least be able to anchor down and be stout against a guy like a Traquavion Smith, for instance, even if it's a herky jerky faster guard, if he's not over, 6'3", 6'4", like both of those guys that were, sort of the lead, ball handlers for the Sixers weren't insanely tall or anything like that. He's just going to need to be able to slide his feet a little bit better. He's just getting beat often. He's got some good size to him for a guard, but he does have to. He's going to need to be able to flip his hips a little bit better, stuff like that, and particularly just absorb contact a little bit better when he does get beat to the basket, not cause it to be an and one. And yeah, just I would like to see a game where his shot making really comes into fruition, and he's hitting on all cylinders. I do think, like you said, Jaren, that he does try to play strictly in. He's such a system player, if that makes sense. Like he's going to do exactly what the play was designed. There's not a lot of elements of diversity, I guess, really, when we're looking at his offense from an angle of like being able to change up what's happening. If a play goes haywire or something like that, being able to do anything that's out of the ordinary. But I would like to see how poised he is. Getting to his spots in the mid-range, through the pick and roll, as well as when a guy goes under him on a screen. See if he can open up the shooting a little bit. Haven't been all like crazy impressed with him. Definitely more negative than positive for me, at least. But it hasn't been a big enough sample size for me to judge a huge opinion. And I did like what I saw from him attacking downhill in that Philadelphia game, like you said. Had some good layups in that fourth quarter. One that stuck out to me was that one where he went baseline off a closeout and finished with his left hand, even though, it was probably easier to finish with the right. So like stuff like that, that was an impressive finish. So it'll be really intriguing to monitor him going forward to see if he actually ends up coming to training camp with the Mavericks, even though he is on a two-way deal. Jordan Walker did not play at all in the first game. He's, 5'11" point guard out of UAB, Conference USA MVP. Guy has a lot of talent. His size is definitely going to be the biggest competing factor for his career in the NBA, but he is a little bit different than McKinley Wright. He's definitely just as quick, and sneaky from a steal perspective, but McKinley Wright is he may be 5'11", but he's like a solid like 205 pounds of good muscle, and he still maintains his speed, has good length to him. Jordan Walker is like more of a Will or Jaren, sort of 5'11",
little build,
he's more of a true 5'11" type of guy like us. You're just your average Joe. He's just very skinny, very shifty, and he, I was really impressed with the shot making. I mean, this dude's fast. He can get in the lane fast, cause havoc. I think he's going to be really good getting to the rim. He knows he plays at his size. Like he's not going to try to do anything too crazy, but conversely, I mean, he can hit some tough ass shots for how big he is. And I'm really impressed with how poised he is. I think the biggest thing for him over McKinley Wright, because I do think he's definitely a better day one shooter than McKinley Wright, is going to be like defensively. Will he just be at too much of a suffering point defensively because of how small he is, and guys being able to just body him. Even McKinley Wright, yes, while guys can shoot over the top of him, he's not getting bodied by everybody. He holds his own size wise. I don't know if Jordan Walker is going to be able to do that. And when the offense is not clicking for him, especially at the NBA where, he was a pretty dynamic sort of playmaker in college, but, he was against Conference USA competition. And I mean, he was the best guy in his team. So he's scoring almost, he's had the highest usage rate is, the primary scorer, things of that nature, in an NBA role where it's much more complimentary, where he may be sitting on a bench for a large period of time and then asked to come into the game as like a third string point guard or something. When all he has to do is score and maybe say, his confidence is off and the offense isn't clicking for him, he just has that sort of net negative effect to him.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just conducive to how consistent he can be in his NBA career. Because I mean, when it's fun, it's really fun, but I could see it getting, even though he hasn't played much, if the shot making is not there, I could see it being a really rough scene to where this guy's, gets played off the court instantly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, relatively, I have liked what I've seen from him.
Yeah.
And a short,
very
sort of sample size.
Minutes.
Yeah, maybe even less.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have liked what I've seen from him. He, to your point, he has made some very, very, very tough shots. And correct me if I'm wrong. I know his nickname is Jelly, and one of the announcers made a reference that he was a part of the Jelly fam or something like that.
I think he used to be back part of the Jelly fam.
Was he the second guy in the Jelly fam?
I saw somebody on Twitter saying, why isn't he getting more? But yeah, I know Javon Quinterly.
For
he's like
Alabama.
the lead dude.
Yeah,
he should be. I was surprised he didn't come out into the NBA
yeah,
draft this year.
I think he's going into his senior or junior year.
Yeah,
but,
he could have came out and been like, so we'll see where he projects, but that's too off topic for a already very long podcast. So let's veer away from that. Anyways, other guys that have stuck out, like I said, like Marcus Bingham, some other guys, Chandler Vaudrin, the one white dude, one guy repping it on the team. Some guys have not played for the Mavericks like we've expected them to. But three other guys rather that have stuck out to me were Braxton Key, Brandon Randolph, and Taze Moore. And we'll start with Taze Moore because I think he stuck out the most. I mean, his rebounding ability, his ability to be a slasher and cut, get vertical, and also be just an absolute like dog on defense has been really impressive. This is a guy who's like 26. He played some with the Legends last year, I believe. Yeah. So I mean, I could see him getting a training camp invite from the Mavericks if he has this sort of productivity. I mean, he's in like put back jams over here. He's really athletic. He's really good at attacking off closeouts. He's a decent finisher in traffic. I think that his thing is how much can he evolve as a shooter and operating off the catch in the NBA. That will be, his big sticking point in terms of getting minutes. But, I've loved the activity that I've seen from him. I think that he definitely has put himself in a position to, at least not from the Mavs, get a training camp invite, at least from another team. I don't know if we get a two-way deal because, those two-way deals that are being spoon-fed to 26-year-olds from Greece like Tyler Dorsey are kind of more few and far between. We're seeing more teams go the, 22 and under route. So I could see him maybe being a training camp invite, but I mean, he could be a guy that could stick on the Mavericks roster at that wing position, being a point of attack ball handler. I mean, he's like excellent defensively. It's a great activity offensively. We're just going to have to see how much the shot translates at the NBA level. Cause if it doesn't, this is a guy that, may end up just getting played off the floor. When the offense isn't as explosive and his cutting isn't making as much of an impact as, it can in certain games. Cause those cutting lanes aren't there for certain role players in every game. A lot more of the time you maybe have to be posted up in the corner a bit more, particularly against NBA defenses where the paint can get more crowded with, really dynamic rim protectors. It won't be as easy as it is in summer league. So I think but I mean, in terms from an effort perspective and how much of a hustle guy he loves, I've loved seeing him. Braxton Key, I really liked his activity as a guy, as an off-ball defender. He's got a lot of off-ball steals. He shot the ball pretty well in that second game. I confused him for Tyler Hall because of the hair in the first game. I thought he was back on the Mavs Summer League roster, but I'm pretty sure he's like with the I saw it on Twitter. I think he's always with the Magic.
The Magic, yeah. There's a lot of
former
really guys on that.
Yeah, he was with the Legends all last year, but sort of a bigger bodied kind of wing. I'd say probably around like 6'5", 6'6".
Yeah.
Has good length to him, but he's not like
good size.
Yeah, right. But he's not like Tyler Hall where he's like you have like weight concerns type thing. Mm-hmm. He's just got good size on him. Runs hard, is pretty athletic, and he plays his role. I really like what I've seen from him. Yeah. I don't just seeing if the defense we haven't seen, like I said, he's been really good as an off-ball defender. He's been solid as an on-ball defender too, but I would just have to see a bigger sample size, see how consistent those intangibles are at the NBA level before I apply more judgment. You know, a guy like a Taze Moore, that activity was so explosive that it does bode credence to the fact that I think he can do that on a larger scale potentially, but it's more just a shot. Braxton Key, I think it's just, you know, seeing maybe how the defense, other stuff like that will translate. And then, you know, I took those first two guys. So if you want to talk about how you think, you know, Brandon Randolph projects, I know he had a better first game than second game, but that's another guy that was a solid wing in the Mavericks rotation for this summer league.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Brandon Randolph, I have no idea where he came from, but he's the guy that's kind of stuck out to me. I believe I think he's out of college somewhere. But he's kind of stuck out to me. You know, he had a very strong performance in game one. Surely dropped off in game two, but you know, nothing out of the not out of the ordinary, but nothing like too alarming of a drop off. But yeah, I mean, just a very sound guy. Offensively in game one, if I can remember right, he was just able to get to his spots, able to make his shots. And defensively, he was able to have a really good presence. I mean, he did pretty much everything that was asked of him. He did that very, very correctly. But in game two, we saw a much more inefficient. He just kind of wasn't active. You know, whereas in game one, I thought that he was a very active player. Yeah, you know, in game two, I didn't see enough of that. I didn't think that he was a very active guy. And yeah, you know, I didn't really see as much of an effect as he had on game one in game two. And that was, you know, a team that kind of needed that, you know, sort of boost throughout the game. But yeah, I mean, they eventually found it in the fourth quarter.
I mean, he's really rangy, really athletic at, you know, that like 6'5" frame, whatever he is. I think he could be a really good point of attack defender. You know, some of the bigger things that kind of stuck out to me because the defense was not near as good in game two. He's getting blown by quite a bit more. Is just, you know, adding strength. He is pretty thin framed. He's going to need to add strength to guard at the NBA level consistently. And, you know, while he was pretty good at like slashing, cutting, you know, doing all the little stuff, you know, being a good off ball defender, you know, he's going to need to probably improve his outside shot in the NBA to really stick around consistently and diversify his offensive game a little bit more. But I mean, you see some potential with that link there for sure. So we came back to earth on him a little bit more in that second game, but still definitely very intrigued from what I saw from him that first game. But I mean, barring that, that kind of wraps up, you know, all the guys that, you know, have been getting actually, you know, actual minutes here in summer league. What did we think from a game perspective? Just a brief overview of how that first OKC game went. You know, we're not going into too much detail of, you know, you don't have to go quarter by quarter and talk about exactly, you know, when the Thunder were playing zone like we did in the post game pods. So yeah, with that OKC game, you definitely saw a sort of a tale of two teams for sure. With that Thunder's team having their young players with a little continuity together, more so than the Mavericks for sure. A lot of guys that have seen a lot more NBA floor. I think that they were definitely able, you know, from the jump to affect the Mavericks from a defensive standpoint. When the Mavericks were trying to get into some of their actions, you could see that, you know, things were trying to log jam at the point of attack with Jaden Hardy. I thought the Thunder team is just very switchable. You know, Chet is tantalizing as a weak side rim protector. He got some shots, you know, with his length that you don't even, you know, necessarily think he could. But conversely, I do think the Mavericks did a good job at getting downhill on him. And, you know, when they were able to get into his body, they were actually able to finish over him a few times. So, you know, really from that first quarter forward, the Thunder were just shooting the lights off the ball. And then, you know, particularly the lights off the court. Like there's no lights on the ball. But you know, Cason Wallace went 6 for 8 from three, you know, made that half court shot. And, you know, they had just a sort of shooting abundance from everybody. I mean, even from Trey Mann to, you know, I think Chet made 1 or 2.
Ousmane Dieng made a few.
Made a few. He looks much more NBA ready than he did a year ago. As, you know, a sort of 6'10" guy that can attack off a closeout. You know, he could be a really good player in my opinion. He's a guy that's getting looked under the radar, but you know, they just were, you know, clicking on all cylinders, did not seem affected by the moment whatsoever. Versus the Mavs, you know, while I thought from a talent perspective, the Mavs really weren't terribly off par with Santa Clara, Jalen Williams not playing. Had he been playing, I think it would have just been too much of a disadvantage at that point because he's honestly maybe possibly better as a creator right now than Jaden Hardy. I mean, that guy's insane. But you know, given the sort of roster that they fielded, I didn't think that the Mavericks were at as much of a talent disadvantage as, you know, some people on Twitter were saying. But I do think that, that Thunder squad, given their, sort of synchronization with each other, as well as just how much more poised and how much more continuity they had. That definitely, helped them in terms of their offensive flow, and they were just making a lot more shots. And the Mavericks, conversely, I thought Casey Wallace played good point of attack defense. And a lot of the Mavericks ball handlers, Jaden Hardy did good against him, but everybody else kind of got swallowed up. And I just don't think the Mavericks were able to really knock in their shots throughout the game, from outside to stay, to ever get the lead down throughout the game to a sizable margin to where they would come back. I mean, it was, they lost by 11, but they were kind of just in that down by 11 to sort of 15 range really throughout the entire duration of the second half. I do like how Dereck Lively and Omax played defensively on Chet. I know we talked about that already a little bit when we were talking about them, but the Mavericks showed a lot of versatility defensively, and I honestly didn't hate how they played defense. I thought there was definitely a better defensive game from them in that performance holistically from the team compared to the 76ers game, where I thought the point of attack defense especially was a little worse. I thought Jaden Hardy played a lot better defense in this one. The Mavericks were just a lot more switchable in that Thunder game. Dereck Lively was a lot more active. They just couldn't, buy a bucket from three as much. And they, the Thunder were also really good defensively. And, they were forcing the Mavericks in some tough shots, late shot clock. And I just think that they veered away initially, from their offense. Jaden Hardy wasn't able to, when the stack pick and roll wasn't there, he wasn't, really in that second half after the offensive flow started to dwindle down. When he was hitting guys, in that weak side wing and corner, they were just missing their shots. And with how good OKC was doing at crowding the paint and withstanding dribble penetration, it just made it a hard recipe for the Mavericks to win that one without them making their shots. But they weren't totally blown out or anything. And against a pretty uber talented Thunder Summer League roster, it wasn't the worst game in the world. And I thought Jared Dudley coached it really well from a defensive perspective. And he caused some problems for Trey Mann and Chet, who had some pretty good games at the Salt Lake City showcase before that. So overall, while I was displeased that we had lost, I wasn't really surprised or anything like that, given how talented that Thunder roster was. And I thought we saw some different nooks and crannies for the Mavericks that are going to be interesting to watch going forward in Summer League.
Yeah, absolutely. And, moving forward to that second game against Philadelphia, Philadelphia, a much less sort of talent, maybe not talent deficient roster for the Summer League team, but, much more talentless. Of course, with Jaden Springer, who's kind of their main guy, he was sat out. I don't know if he'll play any more Summer League for them.
And then, Louis King, Summer League.
Lou King, and you always say what's
Jaquavion
Smith,
Javonte Smart,
Javonte Smart,
DJ Stewart. We're sort of spearheading the cast of players there for the 76ers. But they got some intriguing guys for sure that have a little bit of pop to them, but just not guys that were high lottery picks or first round picks or have got a whole lot of NBA minutes. Louis King was really interesting from the perspective that he was just shooting the lights out all of last Summer League. Thought he could finally translate that 3-and-D frame that he showed out of Oregon into the NBA, but it just didn't really translate this past year. And he played okay, made a few threes, but he didn't impress. He wasn't as dynamic offensively, I guess, as I thought. And you can kind of carry the rest, but that was a sort of surprising factor to me in the game.
Yeah, I mean, that was I guess something that's kind of held him back was his defense throughout his career. But yeah, I mean, he shot the lights out in the first quarter, and then pretty much after that fell apart. And similarly, Philadelphia did the same as a team in that first half. They played really, really good. And then Dallas sort of came alive, under some Dereck Lively, under some Omax sort of, rookie sort of, getting the team hype type of moments. And that's kind of what the Mavericks sort of piggybacked off of, was these sort of hype moments between some of these younger guys. And they built a, sort of not a sizable lead or a sizable comeback, but they built a sort of comeback going into the second half that they could take going into that second half, like I said. But yeah, as the game sort of prevailed on, it kind of seemed like Philadelphia was going to take this one. And this was going to be yet another game that kind of just got away from the Mavericks.
Probably for sure taking us out of the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but taking us out of the Summer League playoffs. But yeah, this was another one where it was in that 11 to 15 range, 11 to 18 range, sort of all game and especially all second half until pretty much the start of the fourth quarter. And after that fourth quarter started, it kind of seemed like the Mavericks got an offensive rhythm, got a really good defensive rhythm going that translated into offense. And that's honestly the hype or the best that we've seen the Mavericks all Summer League so far, albeit through 2 games. But surely in that fourth quarter was the best offensive production that we've seen out of the Mavs.
Fourth quarter, even though it wasn't, holistically a better game than the Thunder, it was probably the best defensive quarter from the Mavericks in all Summer League. I mean, they were everywhere, causing, lots of havoc at the point of attack.
I think Philly only scored like 13 points.
Yeah, and I mean, there just weren't as many guys getting downhill. I mean, and they were closing out on shooters hard. Dereck Lively, I think, established himself a little bit better in the fourth quarter when he did play. So it just seemed the best that everybody had all clicked together. And I mean, Jaden Hardy really never even got things going throughout the game. I mean, he was able to get to the free throw line a large amount of times, but outside of a couple threes and stuff, he wasn't really spearheading the offense. A lot of different guys had to step up. There was no one guy like we kind of talked about that just totally wowed us or impressed us, but every guy gave a little bit of juice. And I mean, it was a great team effort sort of come back, and it was great to keep the excitement up for the Mavericks, who didn't win a Summer League game all of last year. To see that we actually might field a decent roster this year. I don't know about the playoffs, but I mean, we're definitely, I think, at least penciling in another win, hopefully throughout these next few games. And I mean, it was at least exciting to see how spirited everybody was, and that the athleticism on the Mavericks Summer League roster is something that we haven't seen. So I mean, I going forward, I'd be intrigued to see if some of those end of the bench guys get a little bit of run, just see what we have from them as well. But overall so far, I've liked what I've seen. And I don't think I'm too high or too low on any one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe our next game is I believe it'll be today whenever y'all are listening to this at 4:30 against the Golden State Warriors. So we'll see what we get from there.
Now and then it got moved up to 6 o'clock on ESPN for Friday.
Friday's game against Indiana. So looking forward to that one against our former head coach, Rick Carlisle, who's not coaching that team, but I'm sure he'll be in attendance. Jarvis Walker, Benedict Mathurin, if he's still playing. I don't know if he will be.
I think he probably is.
I know he's playing right now.
Rick's I don't know. I feel like Rick's a guy who'd want the kids to
probably still play.
We'll see.
And Andrew Nembhard.
He's playing as well. Okay, that would be a fun one. And I think Isaiah Jackson is on that team as well. Yeah, so I mean, they got a decent little squad. That should be a fun game to look forward to. So you guys can go ahead and we'll actually do a post-game pod for that one. So, it'll be a little bit more in-depth, but it also won't be near as extensive as this one. We kind of had some stuff come up and we had to throw 2 in 1, but it is what it is. We'll be more consistent with the Summer League podcast from here on out. We can guarantee it. And you'll see why in the next few days, hopefully.
Yes, sir. Hopefully.
But anyways, thank you for listening to the Mainstream Mavs podcast. Those of you guys that made it this far in the podcast, our Summer League coverage, as well as hashing out these rumors. I know it was a little bit longer, but some good content in this one. We appreciate for you guys sticking it out. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Mainstream214. Make sure to get at us at Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. We're virtually on almost any podcast platform where you can get your podcast. Even Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, all that stuff you can find in our link tree on Twitter. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating or review and follow us. Turn on the post noties if you are listening on any podcast platform. And, if you do mess with us and you like our content, if you don't, otherwise there are plenty of other Mavericks podcasts for you to go to, and we enjoy our other Mavericks podcasts, or they're
competitors
not
podcasts.
No, they're just friendly competitors.
They're friendly competitors.
But if you don't like us, there are other
plenty of other options now.
Other forums for you to ventilate your frustrations about what we don't like. So just let us know. And also make sure to get us on YouTube, of course. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Mainstream Mavs podcast on YouTube. Comment down below, who do you think is going to have the biggest breakout game out of all the Mavericks on the Summer League roster? Maybe not a breakout game, but who do you think is going to play the best versus the Pacers tomorrow if you're listening to this before the game?
Warriors.
I screwed that up. Yeah, it's the Warriors. Otherwise, if you're somehow listening to this a little bit later after the Pacers game, who do you think is going to play the best in the Pacers game on Friday?
Oh,
there you go. 2 and 1.
It's a comment.
And otherwise, Mainstream Mavs has some exciting things in the works. possibly. But we do have some news coming out very soon for you guys, so stay tuned. That is news not necessarily regarding the podcast, but Jaren and Will news.
Well, for you right now,
Yes.
potentially for me too.
Potentially
So
for
we'll
you.
see. But
So we'll let you guys know as we are able to hash out more details on that.
well, I guess there's two things
yes.
for both of us. Yes, and then
for
for
one
one other thing
yes
for you and
yes.
possibly for me. So
yeah, just stay posted. But the Batman signal is in the air in Dallas.
Yes, it is.
Just like on last
yeah,
pod.
it is one last
Just like
pod,
where Grant Williams cast it out to the city when he was doing his ESPN interview with Kendra Andrews, and then talking to good old Michael Rubin afterwards. All the star-studdedness was around him, but quietly in the shadows, he had a project working, and Batman was ready to come from the scenes despite the facade that he puts on a daily basis. This 3-and-D non-one-dimensional role player. It's nothing but his day job.
Yes, a day job.
His Clark Kent. When it's at night, he's ready to pounce on a lot of thugs and
a lot of hoodlums. And being in Vegas, the night never sleeps. So
that didn't sound politically correct, but at all. But we were just talking about Batman specifically, not me and Jaren, but me and Jaren have things under the shadows too.
We do. Yeah, we do.
We're not ready to pounce on thugs or hoodlums, so don't worry about that, guys. If you we are open to everybody, and we don't care who you are if you're listening to the podcast.
We love you all.
Shout out to everybody. We will catch you guys in the next one.